Hello everyone, today is Wednesday, the 20th of September, 2017. But more importantly, it's block height 486,191. Welcome to our lovely panel. We have Shinobi.
What's going on?
We have Rick.
Hey everybody, how are y'all?
We have Janine. She can't say hi right now. And we have Gibbous. Is your mic working, Gibbous?
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. All right, so let's get to it. So I hope you're liking these clickbaity titles. We do, as I say, live in a post-SEO society. That means we can do whatever we want now. We can just call YouTube videos anything we like because it's all about the hits and the clicks and the views. It doesn't have to be true. But yeah, so I want to go through what Jihan Wu thought were the 7 key differences between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, or at least I did. The only problem was we didn't see very much from this conference, right? So this was all about something about getting to the future, shape the future, blockchain conference. And we didn't see very many of the slides, but number one is everyone can read Satoshi's white paper and writings to understand Bitcoin. Okay, good point. Number two, blockchain is a software implementation of voluntary social agreement. Social agreement is higher than developer authority and the authority of the code. Imagine this guy was a big fan of UASF then. So number three, freedom of speech, freedom of association. A chain fork has the freedom to happen and it will cultivate growth, innovation and progress in the long term. And then 4, hard fork is important and legit methods.
Totally legit, bro. Totally legit.
What just happened to my brain? Right, so these were supposed to be 7 key differences. Have I misunderstood this?
I think it's more likely that he just made a very poor choice of English words because these seem like universal truths for, well, except that hard fork part conditionally, for pretty much any blockchain system. They seem more like commonalities than differences.
It sounded like he was trying to compete with the US Constitution there with the freedom of association. I thought he was going with, you know, like the First Amendment, Second Amendment, you know, just trying to like...
Yeah, it's really weird the way he tried to say that the social agreement, it takes higher precedence than developers. I mean, no shit. But the subtle nuance there is that the code people choose to run is reflective of the social agreement that they're agreeing to. And I think he's just trying to find weasel words to try to be like, no, be part of my agreement.
I love what Blake Anderson's saying in the chat. It's Hemingway, read between the lines. I love it. He's comparing Jihan Wu to Hemingway. And that's very apt. And we also, I mean, we will show you all the pictures that were available, at least on social media, because like I say, we did find one stream of like Roger Ver and somebody was asking him a difficult question. He was kind of fighting back, but I didn't see the live stream myself. I didn't catch it. I don't know if anybody else did. So if you did, please comment in the chat or in the comments below if you're watching this later on. But Gibbous, you had some insights on this. This is actually the volume on local Bitcoins in China, which I take it is not affected by the regulation if people are still allowed to trade it peer-to-peer.
Yeah, not really sure if it's insight, but yeah, I'm keeping an eye on this because as you can clearly see earlier this year when foreigners couldn't do withdrawals in China, there was a massive withdrawals were generally blocked. I think there was a massive increase of volume on local Bitcoins. This is specific to China, and we can see that yeah, it's been going up again last week and the past 2 weeks, and I'm curious to see if this was just a spike or if this is going to be a trend now that China is closing down on closing exchanges.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So this started around, well, you can see an increase actually from February, right? And it's starting to come up here. And now in this week, we're starting to see, you know, quite a big spike. So there's obviously been a lot more interest. And if you're going to start banning exchanges or forcing them to pony up and pay a fee so that, you know, the government can take its little cut and create some regulatory capture, then one would expect this to continue you know, with the sort of volumes that we were seeing earlier in the year from May. I think this one is, and yeah, May, these two really high bars here. But this also could have just been like some big dogs, you know, some whales coming in, buying up a chunk of Bitcoin.
Yes, or
yeah,
even
I forget who said it.
sorry.
Sorry, if I think it was you who said it, Gibbous, that potentially miners might be looking to dump a little with the exchanges out of the question now.
Yeah, just no answers really, just questions. But yeah, you could maybe some miners need some extra cash at hand for coming, you know, just costs that you have to pay on regularly. You know, just thinking ahead of time if it might become more difficult to sell their coins later on.
Yeah, so the link to this, guys, is in the description below, as is the link to the Bitcoin Mumble. I'm finding it quite interesting going through these, actually looking at all these charts. You can see obviously from the global volume that is increasing, but noticing like Brazil here, like massive spike there. What was that back December? No, sorry, this month. Yeah, August just gone. So we had the big spike in August in Brazil. Canada actually had a big spike around May, it looks like there, as did quite a few of them, obviously, because the price was going up significantly. But I just find it interesting comparing the spikes in these graphs. Like some of them have their own little signatures. There's obviously an overall trend towards the volume going up, but then there are these spikes. And yeah, like you say, it could just be somebody who's got a lot of cash or a miner who wants to just dump on the exchange and they want to go OTC because they don't want to move the market, or maybe they don't want to dox themselves on an exchange they think could fall under regulatory capture.
Yeah, and one quick thing I want to say about local Bitcoin volumes. I think I might have said this a few times. That is probably less than half of their total volumes. I probably bought around half of my coins through local Bitcoins. I have never once registered for an account on that site. I have never once made a transaction through their escrow service. I simply completely bypass them and contact the seller myself. And I know quite a few people that do that. So the volume that you see declared on their charts is not even half of it, I bet.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go through the party photos. So Bitcoin Cash. I know there's a lot of big fans of Bitcoin Cash on this show, and those of you home are watching, I don't know, you've been buying the dips on that because you're expecting that to pump at some point. We've got Roger here. Don't know who Roger is. I think he owns a couple of domain names. I think he has bagged some, you know, vanity domain names like Bitcoin dot something.
Yeah, he's
and,
just like, you know, the same guy.
Yeah. And this is Satoshi here on the right. Silence.
What?
That's Satoshi there on the right hand side. That's Satoshi.
That's Satoshi?
Yes.
Really? That's him?
We have to say it, otherwise we get sued. Be careful. Be careful what you say. He's very litigious. Very litigious. We'll be looking at some of Satoshi's code a bit later on as well from the early days, so we'll be able to judge the man. And yeah, so not really very much out there. When you search for Shape the Future, you basically just get the party photos and this like weird documentary thing that just looks like propaganda for Bitcoin. Oh, we've got some more party photos. Look at that. It's very lush, very lavish. I guess that's why they had to pump the price to be able to afford all this shit. Who's that? Who is this guy?
Some crazy guy. He likes pointing guns at his head and taking pictures.
Yeah. I heard he's going to do something pretty horrible if the Bitcoin price doesn't go to $100,000. So there you go. That was the party. If you weren't invited, sorry. You know, you're just not important enough. But right, let's move on. Let's block this crap. Get rid of all the ads. Let's talk about the NYA agreement. And let's talk about the fact that people keep dropping out. You know,
yeah, I think this is really interesting with the Wayniloans, I think is how you pronounce it. They're the first peer-to-peer lending service using Bitcoin in South America. And I don't really know too much about this company, but I can imagine being a first starter in something like that, they probably have a pretty large customer base compared to any competitors or similar services. And one of the big reasons they cited in pulling out of the agreement was how incredibly unpopular the agreement was in Latin America. And so this is not just a business pulling out for their own reasons or to kind of virtue signal. This is like them actually responding to the attitudes of their customers directly. And I just think that's an interesting thing to note versus some of the other pullouts, like F2 pull seemed more like a kind of pre-planned troll than anything based on real-time feedback from users or customers.
I really was curious about the sentence at the beginning, which said that they agreed to a sentence to reach consensus for the good of the ecosystem. This sentence was later changed to a longer agreement without our notice, and it was known as the New York Agreement. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I mean,
So
if you remember,
yeah,
when they first published the agreement, nobody actually was on the same page as to what they agreed to.
Yeah, I only saw the leaked one, and I just assumed that was the full one. But it sounds like there was a shorter version, and they agreed to the shorter version. Then more stuff was added, and they didn't know about that, and so they ended up being tied to this New York agreement. It sounds like an unstable agreement in any case, and they weren't happy with the without the mandatory replay protection, as you already said. And also, we're joined by Aknix as well. Aknix, can you hear us?
Hey, what's up?
Cool, cool. Glad you can make it. And Charlene as well.
Hello.
Cool, cool. And good to have you guys, and also Beauty Bubble and James Bond and Blake Anderson and Dillinger and everyone in the chat. Thank you very much for joining us today. So yeah, we're just going over this Wayniloans, and yet another company has pulled out of the agreement. If you want to find out about it, I just typed in Wayniloans and do a search into Twitter. You can see what people are saying about it. But we really like this Node to X meme that's going around right now, which I think Mad Bitcoins at World Crypto Network started. And we're kind of hoping that we get some hats made of that, right?
Hopefully.
Talk to Samson about that. Well, we've got the Dragon's Den one. We may as well just go for it. Right. So should we take a look through some of that old code? I don't know if any of you have taken the time to read this. This was doing the rounds today, and it was dug out by Steve, a friend of ours on the channel, who said that he found this article by Ray Dillinger, who claims that he audited the code, the Bitcoin code, back in November 2008 from Satoshi himself, and that this was being done with Hal Finney and so forth. And we actually did get a copy of the code off the Nakamoto Institute. Anyone, go off and put that into your favorite search engine, look at for the full Satoshi, and that will give you the background. You can click on code, and then you can actually see some of the earlier versions of the code. But Shinobi, why don't you tell us what was so interesting about this article?
Well, I think it's kind of very strange because like one of the things he said was that the cryptographic code was very tight. One of the biggest problems with the early code was directly using the public key from your key pair instead of the hash of that as we do now, which has a much like less window to crunch the numbers and try to attack. And for him to sit here and say that Satoshi's code was very cryptographically tight when he didn't even take the initial double hashing method used now in most things to add that extra security to it, I find that very weird. And to just really like complement the code at all from this initial client, it's kind of like cognitive dissonance in my mind. The code base was a mess. And like it was riddled with bugs. The architecture of everything, it was very poorly thought out. Like pretty much every function was just crammed into the main source file. And for anyone out there not familiar with software development, it's generally best practice to isolate different functions of code in their own file along like pretty much what they do, and keep things dealing with the same data structures or doing the same general functions in their own file, so that it's easier to kind of trace what the code is doing where, and just it's easier to maintain and make sense of. And there was almost no effort to do anything like this. And then the one last thing that really boggles my mind, him complimenting this, the initial method for transacting. Nowadays, you can throw out an address through whatever means that you want. You just present it on a piece of paper, send it over a text message, post it on a website, and you're actually just grabbing that key which you assume, or I assume you verify with whatever method you're using, and then just craft your transaction and push it to the network. Well, originally what it would do is actually query an IP address and ask that address through the Bitcoin port, give me a public key. And it did absolutely no verification of this connection or an identity check of the IP whatsoever. It simply made the query across the network, grabbed the public key that it got, and anybody along that way could have intercepted that connection unencrypted and just provided a public key, and it just signed the transaction and sent it off. It was one of the most piss poor, ridiculously insecure ways for managing a transaction that I could imagine. And just the idea that somebody is praising the quality of this code is ridiculous to me. The concept, the protocol itself, yes, like that was a monumental historical event. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But the actual code implementing it at the time was a complete mess.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the list of CVEs for early Bitcoin, and it just goes on and on. And you know, once the developers really start hitting it, they all get fixed and they're all resolved, and we start shipping stuff out to modularity, and yeah, it's the Bitcoin we know. And yeah.
Well, later on,
yeah, like one of the earlier bugs was an op return transaction would let you spend any output. Like you just arbitrarily pushing data, you could spend anybody's coins, and he's praising the quality of the code.
Well, he just said
like,
it was
that doesn't
tight.
make sense to me.
I mean, he could have been talking about the protocol rather than the actual, you know, because it was a minimum viable product at the time. It was just, you know, shipping it to get something out the door, to get feedback, and there were no hurdles, right? One of the points that Dillinger makes is that unlike now where you've got all these ICOs, you know, Satoshi wasn't trying to do that. That was a Freudian slip. I don't have any inside information on whether or not actually Satoshi. So it's like the third time I've done that now. And he's sort of making the point here about ICOs. They don't have any real business plans. They're not explaining what they're doing to make money or providing services. And he's kind of lamenting what it's really become.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, if you have the link to the tweet right now, John Matonis actually tweeted this out, pretty much praising Mr. Dillinger. And like, this is entirely my opinion and not reflective of anybody else's here, unless they want to speak up and add their name to it. But this reeks of another attempt at pushing a ridiculous narrative from Craig Wright. Like, it's like John Matonis works for nChain, and the way he's pushing this out there, and as I hope demonstrated going over some of the huge flaws in the code initially, like, I really feel like this is just laying the groundwork to continue trying to push this Craig Wright is Satoshi narrative in an underhanded way. So I mean, again, it's just my opinion, but I want to throw that out there. If things go that way, remember I said it.
Yeah, I mean, he's not praising him. He's just like Ray Dillinger Bear. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe that's like a nickname or something. Did a code review and security audit. I mean, he's just stating it as something, you know, as matter of factly. He hasn't praised him so much just yet. But I think you're right to your spidey senses have pricked and you're onto something maybe.
Yeah.
Rick, anything?
Well, I mean, I guess I could say that, you know, I do know that, you know, Craig Wright and that whole camp is trying to push this original vision of Satoshi, who is Craig Wright. So, I mean, I could totally see this coming out just to sort of be like, well, look, this is where it all started, and just to build something up later for them. I hear where you're coming from, Shinobi, and yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Well, remain vigilant, and we'll watch how this develops in the coming days. What about atomic swaps, though, on Decred? Oh, my God. Really? Who put this in the news desk? Are we talking about some shitcoin that's done some stunt to get attention, but nobody will ever...
Oh, man, what is this?
What is this? Who put this in here? Come on, own up.
I'll own up. I put it on there just because I think this is really interesting. I like the way that, you know, new technology is getting developed. And, you know, I don't know all the technical aspects of, you know, atomic swaps, but I do like the idea of just another avenue for a decentralized exchange to transfer our cryptos without, you know, there being some centralized entity in the middle. And I'm not sure where it's at. I just know it's early on in the development, and that's why I threw it up there. So I'm not really trying to be pumpy or nothing. I just like the
yeah, fair enough. I'm only teasing. I do think it's good when some of these shitcoins finally display some working model rather than just a bunch of talk and roadmaps and all that crap. And one of the points that it makes is that, well, A, it's not very private. So obviously you're going to have to obscure a lot of the stuff that you're doing either side of the swap itself, because the hash that will go into the Decred blockchain will be the same as the transaction hash on either side. The other thing they mention is that this will only really be useful for, you know, large OTC trades, right? Cross-chain over-the-counter sort of trading, because obviously you're limited by the block times, which are not linear. They're, you know, there's variance between the block times that is statistical, and therefore isn't really suited for any kind of high frequency or anything you would be used to on a centralized exchange.
Yeah, that's what I was reading up on the article. It looked like you have to wait for the block, and this definitely got some tweaking to be done. It's nothing market ready. I just think it's interesting to sort of point out these developments that are happening in the community.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, like I only looked at it really quickly, but I think this is kind of just a first iteration, doing the atomic swap purely on chain, just using a hash lock so that you pretty much craft a transaction on both sides and have the transactions locked with the hash of a random piece of data. It's one of the things Lightning Network uses. And then that way you have the transaction signed and just release the data and both people can confirm it. But you can take this method to the next level and effectively do this over payment channels too. So hopefully they get move into the next iteration pretty soon.
Okay. Aknix, anything?
No, not really.
Yeah, James.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, James Bond said he is interested in atomic swaps. So I think we will follow this then as well. So Rick, if anything new comes out about that, if they actually display something, they do any kind of videos, any kind of media, I'm sure the Decred price will pump. But if it does have substance, it is worth mentioning. And talk about mentioning, this is from Bob Barker. Bob Barker is notorious in the crypto scene, I mean, especially around chat rooms. And he suggested that we talk about this ad blocker. But, well, basically, it's a script that can run in the background when you go to a website. It was tested by Pirate Bay, who actually didn't notify explicitly the users when they came to that website that they would, in fact, be mining Monero in the background. Now, it is worth pointing out, and Bob made this clear as well, that the actual mining algorithm is coming, you know, from another domain. It's not coming from the local host on the domain that you're looking at. So it would be easy for an ad blocker just to filter this out. So it's not in terms of like concern that people are going to start putting this on websites all over the internet. And obviously you'd be able to tell if your computer was working overtime because the CPU would be running really, really fast. So this is not something that Bob said that he was expecting to be pernicious in the sense of, I mean, I'm constructing him now, but pernicious in the sense of like, you know, lots of websites would start doing this as an alternative to advertising in the background and not really telling users. This would be something that would be very easy for the browser to detect, but could be an alternative revenue stream instead of using those annoying ads. And allegedly, and I don't know because I've never used Pirate Bay before, obviously, but Pirate Bay has lots of really annoying ads on it, on various of the mirror sites. And obviously I don't know about anything about the mirror sites or even if the existence of mirror sites because I don't use Pirate Bay.
Yeah, but real quick, one of the interesting things about this though is it does actually have the ability to kind of fine tune how much processing power is used. So it's like, I think the demonstration Bob showed me, it was just using 100% of the available threads and power. But I do believe you can actually query a little bit of information through the browser about the processor, like see how many threads are available. You can throttle it down to a specific number of threads or an overall percentage of processing power. So this is actually something that could be fine-tuned a little more. and not really overload your computer, but still be something to replace the revenue source of ads without making the user experience like real clunky and killing your computer.
Yeah, we need to get Fluffy Pony back on to talk about it. We should have asked him about it the other day, but it was kind of very, very fresh on that day, and Bob didn't tell us and didn't put it on the news desk. This is actually a collaboration. I want to take this opportunity just to remind everyone that you can join us during the daytime when we actually make these in European time zone, that is, and you can click on the link below, bitcoinmumble.com, and come in and actually collaborate with us. We have an open news desk on Google Docs where you can put in your ideas for stories, put in any kind of blurb around them, and even come on air with us and actually talk about them. So, okay, so I think that's kind of a cool idea. I think that might get some traction. Now, Janine, just circling back a little bit to this Craig Wright thing, do you want to say anything about that story about Craig Wright earlier? We were just talking about John Matonis tweeting out that long article.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, people need to understand that this whole thing where Craig Wright started to claim that he was Satoshi, it was all founded on the premise that he got into a business deal. I don't remember the specifics of it, but he got into a business deal where he basically, I don't have any links because I didn't know I was going to talk about it. The whole thing started because he got into a business deal, I think in the UK, claimed that he was Satoshi, and they were bringing him in as part of the business deal on the basis that he was Satoshi. And so at some point he had to prove that. And obviously, if he proved that, it would most likely have to be public because that would be a big deal. And, they would want that to be public because if they wanted as many eyeballs on it as possible, because if they found out later that it was a fraudulent claim, that would probably wouldn't look very good for their business. So a lot of his business deals are staked on the idea that he is Satoshi, and that's why he's promoting this. So I think everyone needs to remember that when they're reading all this stuff about his claims that he's Satoshi.
And of course, we have to say that Craig Wright is the real Satoshi and the one Satoshi in order to avoid any litigation. And yeah, I've got a link here. Oh, this is from the Wired ad. We should also put the link to the GQ recording as well. If any of you didn't hear it, there was the journalist that did the interview with GQ actually made a recording of it, and then afterwards it was released, and you can hear him arguing with Nicolas Courtois, who's a professor of cryptography at UCL in London, and yeah, it's kind of funny. Enjoy listening to that. Yeah, there it is. We'll put it in the description after the show. And if anybody has moderator rights, put it into the chat as well so people can click on it. Right, so moving on to a somewhat related topic, really, I think, because it's about R3. And what we have here is a really cool article. I actually found it via Isabella Kaminska that points out a deep irony in R3, who are currently in a legal battle with Ripple. And basically, Elaine here, Elaine Wee, I think is how you pronounce her last name, is claiming that they could have just done all this in a smart contract, but they're now coming to blows over, this sort of claim that R3 had to put in a call option for 5 billion XRPs at some fraction of a cent, almost 1 cent each. Now that the price of XRP has gone up 4,000%, the option is worth billions of dollars and represents R3's single most valuable asset. Wow, they didn't even have to do anything for that. Ripple wants to renege, and R3 is understandably annoyed. So you guys, she says, this is exactly the type of thing you should have been done with a smart contract, and then goes into explaining. So anyone else read this article and find it amusing?
Oh, that was hilarious.
Very funny. Very funny.
I mean, these are the smart contract people, right?
They are. So why didn't they just write a smart contract? This is Elaine, by the way. This is her Twitter. You should go follow her.
Mike Hearn must have been having a bad day. He just didn't feel like doing it.
Yeah. I mean, they must be absolutely gutted that they didn't get all those shit coins. I mean, that is a lot of shit coin. I mean, just imagine being on Polo with 5 billion XRP and just selling that into the book, just selling it down. I mean, you could
be the happiest kid on 4chan.
Goodbye, competitors. Goodbye.
I mean, it's so much money that you wouldn't even care. You mean they would just do it for they could just do it for the fun of it. But not now, because they didn't write a smart contract, apparently, and they're wrecked. She also makes the point that the dispute over the venue, so one of the things that's come up in this court case is that one of the parties wants to do a legal battle in Delaware, and the other one wants to do one in countersuing in California. Of course, the blockchain would fix all of that, but I don't think so. I mean, she's basically pointing to something called an exit key, which R3 developed in the smart contracting, which basically gives you the ability to defer any kind of exception in the code to a human being in order to make a judgment. But obviously, if they had agreed ahead of time where they were going to settle their disputes, that would have been avoided.
Yeah, I mean, essentially they could have put this on kind of legal rails, right? So that the smart contract enforced the bulk of the conditions, right? And then anything that was left to arbitration could then be, explicitly stated as such.
Okay, Shanine, anything?
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that R3 is still confused about whether it's doing blockchain or distributed ledger, because in a blog post back in February, now my computer's freezing. Okay. So back in February, they wrote a blog post saying that they fell into a semantics trap where they said that in the beginning, they were thinking about building a traditional blockchain platform, but Corda is actually a distributed ledger platform, and it was never designed to be a blockchain. And then they changed their website a little bit, and Corda is still described as a distributed ledger, aka blockchain. So they don't seem to understand what these words mean. So I still find that hilarious. I wonder if that, maybe they don't even know what a smart contract is. We'll have to find out.
Oh, wow. I was not aware of that. Thanks for that.
You got something to say, Rick?
Yeah, I was just thinking this whole R3 story really just shows kind of like the immaturity in the space still, and these things are still growing, and I've heard some problems that smart contracts are going to have in the future, and these are the sort of things where it's like there's humans behind these contracts, and I don't know if you could really code out these guys being bad actors to mess around with their ripple. And I mean, I've heard lots of problems and scenarios with smart contracts where just because it's in code doesn't necessarily is going to play out the way that we think it's going to play out. And I think this is really just like all part of the immaturity, and we're still growing and everything.
Yeah, I think these smart contracts are a bit of a meme, to be honest. I don't know how seriously I take them. I think they just need to be dumb. I don't think they need to be smart at all. I think there are certain things that you want to automate and certain things you want to leave to humans. And I like this sort of exit key approach that Elaine was talking about, where you can defer any kind of exception that's found in the code. But I just think, especially if you're going to put money on the line and you're going to put it on a blockchain, I don't know that it needs to be sent all over the world on a distributed ledger. And I think you're just going to run into problems. You're just going to have lots and lots of people finding bugs, hackers hacking all these contracts. And you could have just looked each other in the eye and done a handshake and written something on a bit of paper and, had a bunch of witnesses. I don't know how useful these things are being hyped up.
Yeah, I mean, really, you need a human being that is capable of arbitrating, or you need physical technology in the real world that can actually enforce the conditions of a contract. And until we really get to sci-fi, smart house, like flying car world, I don't think we're going to really get the kind of technology that can reach into the real world and guarantee conditions of things are met for more complex contracts. You need a person.
Those smart houses, otherwise known as hackable houses, means that your house can get hacked by an intruder, probably of a different class than the kind of intruder that would just break in through the window. Probably went to university, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they bummed out, but they're self-taught, autodidacts, autistic people breaking into your house over the internet. Imagine that scary future. All right, what's going on with Equifax? Let's go to Johnny now. What's the update?
Yeah, so people have been talking about this a lot today. They noticed that a certain Equifax support person going by the name of Tim has been linking people to the wrong Equifax security breach site. Now, as you would have known if you had watched the first episode that we talked about Equifax breach on, I clearly said that the website to go to if you wanted to dox yourself a second time and sign up for their identity protection service, website equifaxsecurity2017.com. Well, people have noticed that someone named Tim at the Equifax Twitter account has been sending the website security equifax2017.com, which actually takes you to a fake site by Nick Sweeting, who's luckily a white hat hacker, so he hasn't done anything nefarious with the website to send you malware or trick you into giving up information or anything like that. So people have mostly been laughing about this today. Now, I believe I sent you one of the tweets. Equifax Twitter has already deleted all of the tweets referencing the fake site, but there was one that was, yeah. Remember, guys, permission chains are a gateway drug. There was a where is it? I think I sent you. I sent. There's an archived copy of one of the tweets if you want to see it, and I think we already saw that. But yeah, they've already deleted all of the other tweets. There was someone said there was at least 20, but yeah, I just found it hilarious that we're going through this whole breach situation, which has to do with a failure of information security, and then you have a support person sending them to the wrong site because they don't even that's one of the biggest risks is that when you set up a domain that's established in a very sensitive situation like this, you're going to get people who are like domain. It's called cyber squatting or domain squatting, where you make a domain you take a domain that's very similar to a legitimate one, and then you use that to scam victims a second time. So I don't know how they didn't see this coming, and they should have really made sure that they were sending out the right website.
Cool, thanks for that. Anybody got any comments?
Yeah,
What a
I think
nightmare.
they've already demonstrated they're probably the stupidest people in computer security in the world.
Yeah, but I mean, this is our credit system. Like, this is the whole thing. Like, this is what everyone depends on to have a car, house, like, to not get behind on their bill. You know how tough. It's just unexcusable.
Yeah, it really is a nightmare scenario with everybody's identities and information out there. It just seems to be getting worse and worse. It's like it's already bad news, but then it just keeps getting worse. You wish these guys, they weren't in control of this much information.
Yep, they have become the lolcow of the OPSEC community right now, and they just keep on providing those lols. All right, final thoughts, chat box. What you saying? Give it to me. Anything you got bottled up? My God, you're all quiet. Why are you so quiet?
Everything will be socialized.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, G was saying like he didn't get the outrage over all the mining scripts, and I was like, because normies, a lot of people just do not know what's going on inside of that computer, and if they're already running something in the background and their CPU's running hot, I don't know, maybe they won't notice, but I agree. I think it will be pretty easy for the browsers to be able to block the scripts, and you probably should be running Node.js and other sort of blocking apps for your browser to make sure that you are protected from that kind of thing. And I'm sure Shining has got some suggestions as well. James Bond giving us the S2X, pumping that meme, maybe some like underwear line that we could make around it. I'm sure we could. Thanks, James. Thanks for your input there. And yeah, and just a reminder from Beauty Bubble to be nice. I mean, she is right. Doesn't cost anything, does it? Or does it, Shinobi?
Everything costs something.
Yeah, that is true. And we started watching Rick and Morty today, actually. Watched one episode. Found it kind of really bizarre.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're
So I'm on the
pulled
drug.
in.
I'm on the drug.
Keep watching. Keep watching.
Just keep on watching. If you find it weird, just keep on watching. That's what I'm going to do. Cool, guys. All right. Great show. Thanks a lot, everybody. So, yes, as I said before, you can join us on the Bitcoin Mumble at bitcoinmumble.com. You need to download that chat app onto your computer or your phone, your telephonic device, and you can join us in the chat room where we collaborate on these shows on a daily basis. And thanks to everybody here for joining and giving us your input. It's been very edifying. And we'll see you tomorrow. If you enjoyed this show, you can hit the like and subscribe button. But remember, only if you want to.